Hello, my name is Andrea Merryman, and I am the Special Education Department Head here at Lynn Classical. Today we are going to talk a little bit about IEPs at a glance. An IEP at a glance is a document that you will receive in September for every student in your classroom that is on an IEP. This document will be given to you by the student's liaison or case manager. Anytime the IEP is changed or updated, you will receive a new IEP at a glance. Let's review some of the basic information you will see on an IEP at a glance. The first thing you will notice is the student's name will be here at the top and also here. You will have the school name. You will have the student's primary disability. So that is located right here. You can see that this student has a disability of a specific learning disability. It's important to note that the student may also have secondary or tertiary disabilities in addition to this primary disability. The document will also have the student's primary language, so that is the language spoken at home, the student's grade, and the student's case manager. You can see that this particular student has Vanessa Biasella. This is the person that you would contact if you have any problems or questions regarding the student. Let's look at some other information that can be found on an IEP at a glance. We can see that at the top here, we have concerns, strengths, and key evaluation results summary. This can give you some great information about a student. For instance, we can see that this particular student loves all sports, including basketball and volleyball. We can also see any concerns that the parent has. So the mother of this student is concerned about her reading skills. Down the bottom, at the key evaluation results summary, there's some very important information, and this should be read closely. Let me point out a few things that you may want to look for. The first thing is we can see we have the student's full-scale IQ. This particular student has a 74 full-scale IQ, which is labeled very low. We can also see as we read along that this student has a difficult time with reading, and reading will affect all of her classes. She will have difficulty with reading, comprehending, decoding, and expressing her language. This should definitely be taken into consideration when instructing this student. Although I've highlighted her reading capabilities, this is where you can also get a good indication of the student's math capabilities. As we continue through the document, we will come across the goals. Each student will have a goal that is based on their needs. Goals should be individualized, not based on the class. So every student should have their own set of goals that is based on their specific needs. Goals are updated yearly by the liaison. The special educator is primarily responsible for writing and tracking the goals. However, you may be requested to provide your insight and input when writing these goals and also writing the student's current performance. The next section is about accommodations. Many of us think that it's only the special educators that are responsible for providing accommodations. However, everyone is responsible for providing accommodations to the students, even if the service is not on their grid page. We'll get to the grid page a little bit later, and I'll explain what that is. So the student will be able to receive these accommodations in all core classes, all electives, foreign language, or any other class that the student takes. It's important to read these accommodations, understand them, and provide them to the student as they need it. We will do further training later on in the year on goals and accommodations. Right underneath the accommodations, you'll see that it talks about modifications. If an IEP says content modified to meet the student's needs, all teachers can modify the work for that student. So I've indicated here where it will say that. So you look for where it says modifications, then it will say content, and it will have some statement like this. Not all the statements are this statement, but it will be extremely similar. A modification is any change that you make to the curriculum. That's different than an accommodation. An accommodation is something additional that you provide to the student. Again, there'll be further training later on accommodations, modifications, and goals. Here are some examples of general modifications that you might offer to the students. And again, this is on an as-needed basis. You might allow outlining instead of writing of an essay or a major project. You might use alternative textbooks or alternative materials for a particular topic. You might allow them to use computer spell check support, maybe a word bank for answers to test questions. You might give them film or video supplements in place of reading text. You might reword questions in a simpler language, and a great place to find that is rewordify.com. Rewordify.com. It will do all of the work for you. Projects instead of written reports. You could highlight important words or phrases in a reading assignment so it stands out to the student. You might modify the workload or the length of the assignment or test. You might also modify some time demands. Maybe they have extended time, and I know that's also an accommodation. You could also modify their grades based on their IEP. So there are lots of options, and if you have questions regarding modifications, please feel free to reach out to me or to the student's liaison. Next up, we have MCAS accommodations. If the student receives MCAS accommodations, it will be listed here. MCAS accommodations should be provided throughout the school year, and it should align with the general accommodations. It is the special educator's responsibility to align those accommodations. However, if a student is receiving MCAS accommodations and they are in your class, you should attempt to provide those accommodations to the students as much as possible. The last thing we want is for the students to get to the day of MCAS and never have practiced the accommodations. I know that this is not always possible, but we should try to do our best to practice beforehand. We will have further training later on MCAS accommodations. I've also provided a link below with the MCAS accommodation requirements. There are very strict rules and regulations as to who gets an MCAS accommodation. You can see the requirements on the link that I provided. These accommodations are strictly regulated by the state. The next thing is the service delivery grid. It's our goal, according to the IDEA legislation, that we keep all students in the least restrictive environment. The grid will show you the type of environment that the students will be learning in. Grid A is consultation. So this is typically for service providers, school adjustment counselors, OT, PT, etc. So this will happen outside of the general education classroom. Usually the student is pulled out for the consultation. Grid B is team-taught inclusion classes. Services take place in a general education setting. It's our goal to try to get as many students in this setting as possible. We have Grid C, which is a sub-separate classroom. This is actually our most restrictive environment. Classrooms here cannot be more than 15 students. And at Lynn Classical, we try to keep that number somewhere around 10 if possible. Some additional things that you should know, and also a review of some things I've already spoken about. First, everyone should keep a copy of their IEPs at a glance and know the students' accommodations you are required to provide. If you have any questions at any time, please reach out to the liaison or to myself. You may be asked to attend an annual review or a reevaluation meeting. It is required by law that every special education meeting has a general education teacher there. So if you are asked to attend the meeting, we do ask that you try to attend that meeting. If you are requested to attend a meeting by Kathy Mancini, that is a 3-year meeting, and it is extremely important that you attend that meeting. You may be asked to provide input for the special education student. The special educator may ask you so that they can accurately write goals, objectives, and current performance when developing an IEP. You are responsible for coordinating with the special education staff when necessary. You should inform the liaison if a special education student is not passing and intervention is necessary. They will be able to help you. You should discuss any behavioral issues with the liaison and/or Andrea Merryman if it is suspected that the behavior is related to the disability. And we are going to do some training on this later, so you can recognize when a student is doing some masking behavior, when they are displaying a behavior that's really them trying to hide their learning disability. And lastly, you are responsible for providing accommodations as outlined in their IEP and also to modify work as necessary. At any point, if you have any questions regarding a student on an IEP, please feel free to reach out to me or to the student liaison. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the day.